some of the stuff, these analogs or these lab chemicals, I mean, they would just like put you in the ground, like in terms of like, really absolutely catatonic almost effects.
History is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
This one is drug related. And, when you think of Japan, you think of, there's a lot of things that come to mind immediately, like incredible culture and food, animation. I mean, the atomic bomb, rebuilding civilization out of the ashes to create kind of technological wonders, a very kind of forward thinking, futuristic culture that also is rooted in a lot of things, stuck in the past, and that can in some ways seem very kind of constricting. One of those things is the way drugs are handled and treated in Japan. In particular, there's certainly some Asian countries that treat them with even more iron-fisted kind of laws. But in Japan, marijuana is absolutely illegal. Possession of it can result in, I think, a minimum of 5 years in prison. And they really hang that law specifically on THC. The very similar system to what they have here in the United States. It's all about a particular molecule that is categorized and scheduled and associated with certain penalties. We are beginning to have a kind of marijuana, sea change here in America as more and more states become legal in terms of recreational use of cannabis. But even before that, for years, and it's really beginning to heat up even more now, we have been seeing things like analogs to THC. For example, Delta 8 is kind of the big one. I've been hearing on some of my podcasts that I listen to, there's a company called Diet Smoke that specializes in Delta 8 gummies and things like that. Delta
I know
8
them. They're not bad.
Yeah.
It's not the same, but they're not bad. It's not as bad as Wizard Smoke, for anybody who remembers that.
Wizard Smoke, exactly, Ben. You're bringing me back. That was the kind of thing you'd see in the old tobacco shops. Don't call it a head shop. Definitely don't call it a bong, or you're out on your butt. That stuff was, I don't even know what that was, Ben, exactly, but they called it that. It was probably just some kind of incense. It was largely a placebo effect, I imagine. But then there was a period where there were all these like lab chemicals. There were different kind of chemical compounds that weren't scheduled yet because they were so new, or they were so kind of like hard to pin down. And the moment one was scheduled, the chemist could just change a slight, tweak the formula slightly and make it a different molecule. And then it would no longer be, in that category. Some of these substances are incredibly potent, and to the uninitiated can kind of be borderline dangerous. I think anyone that's smoked marijuana for any amount of time knows that it's not the smartest thing in the world to do while driving, to be super, super stoned and driving. And now that we've got more legalization of it, we're hearing more advertisements for, stoned driving is still, driving while impaired and all of that, starting to become more a part of the kind of lexicon around impaired driving. But some of the stuff, these analogs or these lab chemicals, I mean, they would just like put you in the ground, like in terms of like, really absolutely catatonic almost effects. We are starting to see this, and probably have for some time, but really starting to kind of hit a bit of a stride in Japan. In March, the Japanese government banned something called HHC, a synthetic cannabis compound that was super trendy after like a Japanese rapper promoted it. It has a lot of other cousins. Again, these, slightly altered kind of analogs where they tweak the formula to kind of keep jumping through these legal loopholes. Something called 9-beta, THCV, HHCO, and something called THCO. And the story today is just about, it's an article that I found in Vice called "A Loophole in Japan's Weed Laws is Getting Tens of Thousands High." And then the little pull quote is, "I can't believe I can get this high in Japan," of all places. essentially, this is a quote from a 24-year-old man in Tokyo, referring to his experience smoking something called THCO, which is a hemp-derived product that contains a chemical that is very, very, very close to actual THC, which is the stuff that's in weed that gets you high. He asked to be referred to anonymously because this is serious stuff in terms of like the government and in terms of being prosecuted for this kind of stuff. Because this stuff is still kind of unregulated in much the same way that things here in the United States along these lines are still in kind of a weird gray area in terms of where the FDA comes in to regulate these things, or, scheduling. Like there was talk of scheduling some of these things here in the United States as well, but then things move a little bit slowly sometimes. So this stuff is becoming really, really popular. And this 24-year-old said, I can't believe I can get this high in Japan and I'm not breaking the law. And yeah, that's basically what it amounts to. In Japan, the sentences are super, super strict, super, super steep for possessing actual THC. But these synthetic cannabis compounds are able to allow the purveyors of this stuff to essentially treat them or import them as oils or food. And this is something that pertains to synthetic cannabinoids that could potentially get people even more faded than actual THC. So it's kind of right now in this interesting gray area that you would think the Japanese government would have figured out how to get a handle on, but as of yet, they have not. But they are beginning to kind of catch up. And it's that same kind of deal. It's almost like Vice describes it as a game of whack-a-mole. It's the same thing that we saw here, where you take one lab chemical or analog or synthetic derivation, and then all you have to do is change a little bit of the formula, and then it no longer falls into that category, and it becomes really tough to pass like broad schedulings of things that you maybe don't even know exist yet. But it's an interesting thing to think about and to follow the way other countries handle things like this, because it does turn out, and we've seen this here. If you guys remember stuff called Spice that was really popular, that was the street name or the whatever you call it, like the over-the-counter name when you buy at the smoke shops for this lab chemical that would get people absolutely out of their minds, messed up, and in some cases having kind of delusions or even heart palpitations or strokes. It's the same way with the stuff that was called bath salts. You may remember the story of the man on bath salts who like chewed somebody's face off. So there is something to be concerned about when it comes to like these unregulated kind of substances, these cannabinoids or other synthetic drugs.
Well, yeah, because it depends on how they're being manufactured. Right?
That's right.
And if it's a smaller operation, you can kind of compare it to moonshine or, distilleries like gin distilleries along a river somewhere during Prohibition in America, where you can't really control. There's no industrial standard. There's, no one coming in and checking all the additives and checking the machinery that's producing the product.
That's right. It's absolutely right. Vice makes the same point, just in terms of like, when this stuff goes unregulated, like with moonshine, you have no way of quite measuring the potency of it. And if you buy some of this stuff or ever take a look at it, if you're ever at your local tobacco shop, it's interesting. Take a look at the labels on the back. You're going to see about the vaguest language you've ever seen in your life. As far as what's actually in the stuff or how many grams or whatever it is you should even partake of to get the expected results. So it is very much a legal gray area that can result in some pretty dangerous after effects.